Who's your emergency contact? Who should we notify in the case of death? Welcome to the USP, where I've spent the last 2+ decades of my life. When you come into the penitentiary, you get categorized. You're broke down into, if you're a gang member, to your affiliate gangs. And after the gangs is race. You know, whether you're white, Mexican, black, Puerto Rican, Asian, Islander, and all down the road. And after that, it gets broken down into regional. You know, meaning, you know, if you're from Texas, if you're from DC, if you're California, if you're from Washington, it all gets broken down to all the different states. And if you're on a compound where there's a lot of dudes that are from your state, then that little car gets broke down into neighborhoods and streets and cities. There's no such thing as not affiliated. And everybody that comes on the compound, regardless of who you are, regardless if you don't want to gang bang no more, there's going to be a time where you're going to be called to go on a mission. And going on a mission doesn't matter if you got 2 or 3 dudes going up against one dude. It doesn't necessarily going to mean that everything's going to turn out the way you expect it to or the way you want it to. There's been cases where dudes that went on missions on multiple, with multiple dudes to go get one dude, end up getting fucked off, end up getting hurt, getting killed. And there's other times where dudes get sent on a mission to go discipline their homeboy for a debt or because he disrespected somebody. With no intention of causing serious bodily injury or even snuffing the dude out. But there's been occasions where dudes went there to go discipline their homeboy thinking they're just gonna beat the homie up in the cell, and then the homies don't ever wake up again and end up catching a body. On those things, when incidents like that happen, it's unfortunate. But there's also incidents where you have every intention to go punish this dude, maybe even snuff him out. But then when that actually happens, now you're faced with the reality that you got a new case, a new body, and some more time put on your sentence. I emphasize in these videos that we're in a hostile environment. And I don't say that for it to be shocking, nor do I ever say that to ever exaggerate the situation and environment that we live in. It's a very hostile and dangerous environment. Through the course of my 25 years, I've known a lot of people that didn't make it. I've seen a lot of people that got butchered, and when you sit and contemplate that for a minute, it's almost to the point where it's just like, I don't want to say it's unbelievable because I've been there and I've seen it, but still, it's just hard to fathom that, with people people out here that got family members behind those walls, they don't really have any idea of what's really going on. They think, that we're in there watching TV, watching cable TV, hanging out, playing video games and all that stuff. But also, when you do hear the stories that some people might share about you of all the craziness that go on, it doesn't really register because you don't have any family members or know anybody that's there. But for those of us that's been there, and for those of you that do have family members in there, I'm hoping that I'm able to give you an insight on what's really going on. through the course of my bid, I did 20, on this last one, I got caught up in 98 and got out in 2022. So almost 24 years, 23 years and 8 months. And through that time, the last 24 years, I've spent at least 45% of my time locked up in solitary, in a SHU. The first 12 years of my bid, I was 6 months on the yard, then 6 months in the SHU for whatever reason. Sometimes it was for an incident that I got into, or sometimes they put me under investigation. Another time it might be, they caught me with some wine in my cell or a knife. I've gotten plenty of write-ups and spent plenty of time in solitary. Now, at this time, when I'm about to come home, this is 2021, I end up in the SHU again. I end up in the SHU over an incident that was in my block that had nothing to do with me and got put on an investigation for homicide. And I'll elaborate on that story going forward when we get there. But for the purpose of this story, while I was on the compound, the natives said they're gonna hit one of their people that came off the bus. He had some shit that was on his jacket that wasn't kosher. The dude, now, I don't understand why the administration would put him on this compound in the first place. The guy had a charge that said that he killed a toddler. And I emphasize that the natives are one of the most, if not the most, active groups when it comes to cleaning up their car, when it comes to handling their business as far as, towing the line about rats and child molesters and sex offenders and all the rest. So the administration know that this dude is not gonna be able to walk the yard, right? He's got his case has him killing a toddler. We don't know, I don't know the details of all the case, but there was dudes that knew him from the res, and they looked it up and they confirmed it that, yeah, this dude was guilty of this incident. So they smashed him out. Whatever, you hear the helicopter come, they had to life flight the dude out, and so on. But, I'm not really interested in the detail. I just know the natives handle their business and we keep it pushing on to the next day. But fast forward a few months later, I find myself in the SHU pending this homicide investigation. So in the SHU, you get to rec 3, maybe 4 times a day for an hour at a time. And when you go out, it's just a bunch of rec cages, like a little chicken coop. And this time in the BOP now, you can't rec with nobody but your cellie. They don't put any more than 2 people in a cell in a rec cage anymore because of all the incidents that's been going on in there. So me and my cellie, we go out to rec and we go to holler at people that's on our tier or from another tier that's in the other rec cage. And the native bros that was in that incident where they smashed that dude that, killed that toddler, they were in the cage next to me. And the story I'm about to share with you comes directly from them because I'm on the rec cage talking them through the fence. Now I understand these 2 dudes, both of them had less than 2 years left. But the way the program goes in the penitentiary is everybody gets a number. When your number is called, it's time for you to go on a mission. You got to go. If you don't go, then you're going to get smashed for not going. So most of the for the natives that I've been in the penitentiary with, When their number is called, they go and they handle their business, regardless if they're 2 years to the house or got a life sentence. They feel, I bet a lot of good natives, and they feel they have an obligation to uphold the integrity of their car and their community. So they go willingly and even volunteer to go, help maintain the peace and maintain the order within the organization, within their group. Well, these two dudes, they were living in EB, and the dude come off the bus. The native bro come off the bus. When the natives come off the bus, with the natives, most of them, they're all from reservations. So there's always somebody that was from one of their reservations that knows about their case. Before the paperwork even comes out or whatever, they'll be like, man, I was on the res, or I was in the county with him, and he told, or he's here for a sex crime, so on and so forth. But that in itself is not enough for them to make a move on it. Not, ordinarily. They gotta come after they get get the name of the native or whatever. They run their name through Pacer, and on Pacer is what attorney have access to. Is everything about the case, your discovery, your motions, whatever your charges are, is right there for anybody to view if they pay the $100 for the Pacer. So they run the dude's name, and it comes back that he had, snuffed out a baby. And, like, people look at us because we've been in prison, and they assume the worst of us. They assume that we're a bunch of pieces of shit, out here stealing from our family, out here cutthroating our homies, out here, violating women and kids and all the rest. Like, no doubt there's people in the penitentiary that are guilty of all those things. But there's a lot of men in the penitentiary too that carry themselves and uphold themselves to a certain standards. And there's just some things that we can't stomach. There's just some things that we're not going to tolerate. And one of those is violating a woman, violating a kid, snuffing out a kid, and telling. So when that came about, these two dudes were called to go on this mission. And they have every intention to punishing this dude. But again, like I said, when you go on a mission, there's no guarantee that it's going to work out the way you want it to work out. But they caught this dude on the second tier coming out. Two of them started piecing him up. They didn't have no knives. They didn't have no weapons. One of them just caught him and started beating him up, and he dropped. And when he dropped, they started stomping him out, started jumping on his head, kicking him. One of them's kicking him, the other one's jumping on his head. But the stairs in our unit are metal, And when they were jumping on his head, I guess where he fell, his head was leaning on the edge of the top step. And they're going to town on him. They're stomping on his head like it's a trampoline. And they're stomping on his head, And, him being on the edge of the step, the edge cut into his skull and cracked his skull, and his brains leaked out. They didn't know this at the time. They were just pulling in the work. The COs ran up there, maced him or whatever, contained the situation, and took him out. But they ended up locking the unit because the dude, they had when you come in, everybody goes, they order everybody to lock in their cell. But the unit didn't back out, didn't open back up because the dude on top of the step wasn't moving. And people in the unit were saying that, they seen shit dripping from his head off the steps, but thinking it's blood. Because, when you get a head wound, like if anybody's ever been cut in the head, been hit in the head, that shit bleeds a lot. And a lot of time, it looks more severe than it is. I know from personal experience, I got hit in the back of the head with a hammer. I got a gash about maybe 1.5, 2 inches. But while the COs came and escorted me out of Unicorn where the incident happened, my shirt, the back of my shirt, it's dripping. It looked like I got my whole back of my head blew out, But I got like 8, 9 stitches in there, a headache for like 3 weeks. But when you're looking at it, it just looked like, a bloody mess. So everybody assumed the same thing. Like, hey, yeah, he got stomped on, probably got cut on his head here and there, and it's just leaking. Well, at the time that I'm talking to the homie, in the rec cage, he's like, yeah, man, we end up freaking busting his skull open on top of the steps, and they said his brain leaks out. And now they're in there fighting the case. At the time that I was in the shoe with them, they were being interviewed on their way to ADX. Florence and ADX is in connection, is right next to each other. So a lot of people that, like if you were on another yard or something and you kill somebody or you severely punish somebody, you might just get sent to the smooth program or get transferred to another penitentiary. But being Florence is so close to ADX, they can just cuff you up and escort you across the street, and you're in ADX. So while I was in the shoe at that time, man, there was at least 12, 13 people that was on their way to ADX for the incident that was happening in the last few months on the yard. So they're like, yeah, man, we're on our way to ADX. They just came and saw us today. We're being reviewed, and I think they're gonna accept us. But he's like, I don't even really care about ADX. I only got like 2 more years. Right now, I'm just, they were concerned about catching more time. Both these dudes had less than 2 years left. And when I was talking to them in the rec cage, they were hoping they could plead out to like 7 years for involuntary manslaughter or something, because the dude didn't make it. They flight him out. He never came back, and they never got sanctioned. When you go to the shoe, you get a write-up that says, oh, you got caught with a knife or assault or whatever. And you go see the disciplinary officer, the DHO, and he gives you, okay, I'm going to put you in the shoe for 60 days or 120 days or a year, whatever. But when the DHO don't come and see you, that means you're getting a street charge, because once they sanction you inside the prison, they can't put a street charge on you. Somebody said it was like double jeopardy or whatever, but I've been through it. I've known other people been through it. When you go to shoe for an incident, you're hoping for that write-up, because once they write you up and you go to see the DHO and get sanctioned, that case is done. But when you don't get that write-up and you don't see the DHO, it's been referred to the FBI, and the FBI's picked it up. So the FBI picked up their case. And I was only in the shoe for 4 months, so I have no idea what the end result was with these 2 youngsters. But again, when I was talking to them in the cell, in the rec cage, they were hoping they were able to plead out to 7 years for involuntary manslaughter. But the story that I shared with you, the reason is that, when you go on a mission, it's not necessarily going to work out the way you want it to. And even if you might not intend to severely hurt the dude or snuff the dude out, in that moment when you're caught up, you're in a zone. and you're just stuck there. And then by the time you come back to your senses, it might have went too far. And my heart goes out to them youngsters because they just did what they supposed to do. But for real, my beef is with the administration. You know that this dude was never supposed to have been on this compound. You know the record, the history of the Native Americans, that they go hard. You know that if this dude gets put on his compound, he's going to get punished. But yet, you still threw him out there. One, because you yourself don't want to do what you don't want to do yourself what you're hoping these dudes do. Because nobody likes this, dudes that come in with these cases when they're violating women, violating kids. But you're not legally able to just, give them the death penalty or the lethal injection. So you're hoping that you throw them out on his compound so that the inmate population would do the dirty work for you. But then, when they do the dirty work for you, you turn around and punish them by putting cases on them. The penitentiary's a trick bag, man. Welcome to the USP.